the judge was very cautious before holding Musk in contempt and appropriately directed that both sides try to work out an arrangement that would obviate the need for getting the court involved. But I don't think this by any means suggests that the SEC's run into court was ill-advised at all. I think what they did was very prudent, and I think what the judge did was prudent. And now the question is whether Musk's attorneys will be allowed by Mr. Musk to actually work reasonably with the SEC.
I mean, that's not exactly the interpretation I got. Obviously, I'm an outsider watching this, but when I saw it, I thought, wow, she did not do what the SEC was hoping here. Elon Musk walked out feeling like he was vindicated almost in this. What makes you think that the next 2 weeks there's going to be any sort of movement that the SEC could say, hey, we won this round?
I think the SEC will, as it has throughout this matter, attempt to reconcile the nature of Mr. Musk's impetuous behavior with the needs of public investors for fair disclosure. In my view, the question will be whether Musk's attorneys are permitted in good faith to negotiate with the SEC. To me, that's a big issue. I don't have any doubt that the SEC's attorneys will negotiate in good faith with Mr. Musk's attorneys.
Now, I really appreciated the judge talking about everyone putting on their reasonableness pants.
Yeah, your big boy pants.
I thought that was well put. How much of this, though, is a reflection of a change in media? You know, we're not talking about a press release that went out that was incorrect. We're talking about a tweet that was wrong and corrected a day later. To me, this feels like what could have been 10 years ago a mistake on live television is today, you know, a mistweet with a correction. How much of this is just a change in technology and the sort of attitudes that are now evolving to catch up around it?
I don't think the change in technology is what's at issue here. What Mr. Musk did was basically tweet out that they would sell 500,000 cars by the end of the year. A day later, he corrected it. The difficulty was the original tweet was wrong. And as we now see in the news today, Tesla is having huge difficulties meeting all of its delivery commitments. So the materiality of this issue seems to me to be clear. And all Mr. Musk had to do was run the tweet by his attorneys the way the consent decree required, but he didn't do that, and he then bragged about not having to do that, and that is why his conduct was potentially contemptible.
No, Harvey, you're talking about the 60 Minutes interview. First of all, his tweet right after the settlement was reached where he calls them the Short Sellers Exchange Commission. Then he goes on 60 Minutes and he talks about how even if I wasn't in that title, I'm still going to be running things, which, by the way, as a majority shareholder, that is kind of how it's going to be happening. Harvey, what's the take for the SEC? I can understand them being really frustrated by this. What is their venue that they have to actually do something with this now?
Well, I think what they have to do now is create an environment where the potential difficulties facing Mr. Musk for continuing to be irresponsible are so clear that even he gets a dose of responsibility and decides to clear his tweets. I think whatever comes of this 2 weeks, the SEC will have scored an important message to Mr. Musk, and hopefully his behavior will improve if that is humanly possible.
But Harvey, just real quick, can you just give us what are the possible permutations here at this point in the ball game? In terms of, are we talking about a fine? Are we talking about simply just a new program in which, you know, he's allowed to tweet, but everything goes in a certain, goes to the lawyer first? What are we talking about specifically, you think?
I think the permutations are first escalating fines that hit him personally. He has to feel this in his own pocketbook. It can't be Tesla that is made to pay for this. It has to be Musk, who understands there's a terrific downside to being irresponsible. If that doesn't work, then I think steps would have to be taken to cabin his ability to sort of push his agenda without complying with the court's order. For example, putting his shares in a voting trust to vote to be voted in the same direction as unaffiliated shareholders vote their stock. Once he feels real pain, I think he will start to adhere to the court's order.
Alexis, what's the feeling?
To me, this feels like asking a CEO when they come on Squawk to do live TV to have a PR person with them and whispering in their ear before they're allowed to comment.
That's a really interesting take on things.
And I think there's a very risk here to this dangerous precedent because we live in 2019. The Twitter as a platform did not exist a decade ago or decades before that, but the idea of a flub on live television is a common thing where we would not expect punitive measures from the S.E.C. a day later if the company issued a correction.
You know what? Let me take that back,
Please.
though. I think that this, when I saw the tweet that he did, that he got in trouble for this, I thought, oh, it's unfortunate, but he fixed it. Whatever. He didn't mean to do it. That was an accident. However, I think it was all his kind of thumbing his nose at the S.E.C. beforehand that got him in this hot water.
Yes.
You don't thumb your nose at a regulator. You don't tell them you don't care what they think. You don't go on national television and tell them you don't care what they think. I think this tweet in itself was not the big problem. I think all of his behavior before was.
Yes, and so I can't condone the sort of teasing of and the lampooning of, like, that unprofessionalism is not a good look. But the principle we're talking about here of expecting CEOs in the age of Twitter to be checking everything with a PR person is
However,
ludicrous.
This is a consent decree that he agreed to and that he signed off on. This is not like somebody saying this to you, that you can't be doing this. This is a guy who's already fallen in hot water a lot of times, has actually agreed to this with the S.E.C. as a way of getting out of bigger trouble.
Right. I understand.
That's, I mean, that's the first take that I've heard that I actually thought, okay, that makes sense. But then when I think about it a little more, he's not your average CEO. He's already in big trouble over this.
I realize that. I think this is interesting territory, though, because we're going to see more and more CEOs taking companies public that have grown up in the age of Twitter, where we do not think of our PR team as the actual press release team.
And honestly, I appreciate CEOs like that. I want somebody who is not speaking after they've been lawyered up. I want them to really say what they're thinking and tell us.
What did you think of the original tweet that got him in hot water?
The 420 tweet?
The 420 tweet?
That was a foolish tweet, right? Because now you're talking about a major action of taking a company private and setting a stock price and clearly
lost or made
it.
money based on that tweet.
Yeah, I'm not going to come here and defend that tweet. That was clearly a mistake, and measures need to be taken. Those measures also need to take into account the sort of changing world.
But let me just suggest, if you made a material misstatement on our air, I believe that you could be held accountable. That, by the way, there have been numerous cases where either fraud's been involved or all sorts of things, where video of CEOs and public statements that they made are then presented to prove the case. So whether it's on television, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's at a press conference, whether it's in front of investors, I'm not sure. I think what we've seen, if we look across the media spectrum, is that the standards have shifted a bit. And I think it's more important than ever now, because we're entering an age where we're beyond the press release as a means of communicating this, that whatever the decisions are made, and I agree with the judge in her reasonableness pants, they need to be prepared. Harvey, jump in, please.
Yeah. I just want to make one observation, and that is, I think Twitter is a very poor device for making serious corporate announcements. It's a great communications vehicle for individuals, but so much in the way of corporate disclosure is nuanced. And when you have an individual who doesn't get the nuances, or at least won't take the time to address them, you get bad tweets. And that's part of the problem here. It's not that the S.E.C. isn't recognizing Twitter. They've allowed these kinds of communications. It's that Mr. Musk has to be more responsible in how he uses that mechanism.